Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, Prashant. Always the first to say hello. Today, I am wearing the badge of my beloved Sheffield United. We're starting the playoff semi-final against Bristol tonight. If you're remotely interested in football, if you aren't, I'm sorry I bored you with that fact. Today is going to be an interesting conversation. I've gone and got one of my closest friends and a former colleague. So I'm not quite sure how this is going to go. Usually I come with some kind of script, but I got absolutely nothing for this one. Came back on the back from RSA last week. For those who were at RSA, it was interesting. I think the hot takes are that AI now needs meaning. I think that NHI or non-human ID is coming and it's coming rapidly. And I think that data and the power which therein lies, which is not a pitch for anecdotes, but could be, it is really driving thought about how we approach security in an age of AI and data. Buzzwords, fancy marketing, and crazy logos no longer cut it. And the reality is the floor probably needs to die. I don't think vendor-sponsored floors are the thing anymore. I think that most people congregate outside of those in meaningful events and conversations. But in the end, the biggest thing for me from RSA is spending time with friends and those that I care about deeply. I got multiple hugs from Adam Arellano, previous guest on this show, and spent some time at the CISO Society with George and Jason and Larry, who are also dear friends of mine. And that are always wonderful things. So if I didn't shout you out, I'm sorry. I'll remember you next time, but maybe you can shout me out instead. Let's bring on my guest today. His name is Chris, Mr. E. Honda, or Chris Honda. Currently working at Whistic, and we're going to have a chat about goodness knows what. I better work that out in the next 30 seconds, eh? Let's bring him on. Mate, how are you?
Doing good. How are you, man?
I can't complain. I feel this is the weird one. I'm good friends with all of my guests, but we go back so far. This is really strange to be in a recorded video call that other people can see.
It really is. I mean, we've been on a ton of calls before, but never really in this format. I mean, and that's what I've been thinking about. I was like, what are we even going to talk about? You know everything I've done, so.
Yeah, I don't know either. Let's see where it goes. So right, introduce yourself, and then standard question for me: your hero, your hobby, and the biggest risk you ever took. Go, fire away.
All right. I am Chris Honda. People call me E Honda every once in a while. You know, the Street Fighter character. I'm currently the manager of security risk and compliance at Whistic. We do third-party risk stuff, which is really fun. And this is I've been preparing for this, and I still don't really have a good set of answers. I have a lot of heroes, but I'm going to try and deviate from I think you said in one of your most recent episodes that Jesus tends to be the most common one. So I'm
Jesus and Dad are very common.
I was going to go Dad. So, I mean, Dad is certainly up there, but for the sake of giving a different answer, I'm going to go with my great grandparents. So I'm fourth generation American. I mean, I am American, but my great grandparents on my dad's side immigrated from Japan a little more than 100 years ago. And all right, there's, without going to the history, right, with how Japan and America interacted during World War II, there was a lot of that my great-grandparents and my grandparents' generation, they were all in the camps. So a lot of how they act and how they taught my parents and then how they raised us as well carried over with a lot of, you know what, bad stuff is going to happen. And you know what, sometimes you just have to accept it, go on and do good things with your life anyways. So I look back at a lot of that and see that's where, you know, I just kind of take bad things as they come and try and get over it and realize that, you know what, that's just part of life. So yeah, not trying to go too down the I guess the word or the deep on that side. It's certainly high level, but I mean, you said think about heroes, and if we're going,
I like it. I mean, we could go off on a completely random tangent here, but I find it fascinating when people go through turmoil caused by a country or by a social system, but stay within it and idealize themselves back to it. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, with the easiest reaction for someone who's been through a campaign experience like that is to become very anti-America and leave. But like to have a different reaction, different response, it's really interesting. Hobby and biggest risk you ever took.
Yep. All right. So hobby, you know, I got a kid, so most of my hobby is around whatever my daughter wants to do. She's doing dance right now, so we dance a little more often than we used to because she loves dance. But if we're talking hobbies and as in things that I like to do myself, I'm still figuring that out. I'm trying to get over being a workaholic. So, I mean, recovering from that perspective, and you know that, man, you've been telling me for years to take more vacations, but it just depends on the week, the weekend, whatever's happening. I'll try and go out and hike because I got beautiful mountains 5 minutes from my backyard. Maybe I'll spend a few hours on the weekends doing a woodworking project, building a shelf, but I have no one consistent hobby. It's just
You have a million hobbies. At any point, you've been a sourdough baker, a barbecuer, a kimchi maker, woodworker. You've taken up a lot of hobbies. It's almost like a cartoon caricature at this point.
I mean, you're not wrong, but as you'll notice, I mean, most of the ones you threw out are food related. So yeah, food is my preferred hobby.
That's true. Prashant says you have to sign off, by the way, with the E-Honda hands in rapid form. I reckon if you go quick enough on the camera, you'll probably make the blur, but we'll get back to that later.
Yep.
Biggest risk you ever took? I always find how people answer this interesting.
Yep. Oh, so I mean, there's a few, and I'll deviate a little bit. Most people on the show, I feel like they go with the professional risks. I'm going to go with the personal one and qualify it and say it was definitely a good risk and a calculated risk. I'm gonna say my biggest risk was getting married to my wife, because when you talk to people about choices that have changed their life trajectory, almost universally one of the biggest ones is your life partner that you choose to spend all your time with, right? And that's where I feel like luck is the wrong word, but I feel like having Molly, my wife, has been fantastic, because back in the day when I said I want to be a band teacher or I want to go work for the DoD and be a linguist, she's like, yeah, you know what? Whatever you're going to do, you're going to be good at it, and we're going to find a way to make it work out monetarily. She's very happy I've made this shift. I make much better money than I would have as a band teacher, I'll tell you that. But she's been very supportive in whatever crazy career things I want to try out. So biggest risk, and it's paid off very well for our family. So
I agree. A few people have brought that up, and as Simon's put in the chat, everyone feel free to ask any questions that you want. A few people have brought that up, and I agree. I think that who we marry defines very much where we go in life, whether they back us, or sometimes it's also the counterpoints, right? That says, I'll back you, but that's a terrible idea. Yep. Like it's that's equally as valuable, and support and sacrifice. And if you find someone who emotionally and kind of socially counteracts you, almost, they have the same way you try and hire people to fulfill your gaps. I think if you marry someone, you have to marry someone who kind of fills your gaps, right? And I think that's interesting. Yeah, Hales has heard me mention on multiple sources at this point, and all things a bit weird, but yeah, I totally agree. I think he married to find who you are. I want to do one quick cyber story, and then I think I know where I'm going with my conversation. Yeah. So, Pat Oper, CISO of JP Morgan, pretty much turned RSA on its head, because I think strategically, intentionally, he released an open letter to the entire cybersecurity community the day before RSA. And it's probably the single most important buyer or CISO there's probably in the US market in terms of kind of power and sway. And we have our viewer anecdotes, and this isn't a place that I share the anecdotes views, but his point is the fact that vendors need to wake up and need to do their part to make the ecosystem stronger. That it's no point securing JP Morgan if the vendors aren't securing themselves and aren't giving transparency and visibility into continuous monitoring and reality of what they do and how they're secured. I mean, you obviously work on the third-party risk space, so thoughts on that? I think it might be a comment that starts turning third-party risk on its head in the next 6 months.
I agree. I think that there is a caveat in there, not so much that vendors shouldn't, but that there's also accountability on the other side of the table. So, I mean, I think he called out a lot of the right things, meaning security after the fact is the standard still, whereas secure by default it happens to an extent for a select pool of vendors, but is pretty small. It's something that you have to consider now, because the investment getting in after you've shipped the feature, after you ship the MVP, it just gets harder and harder and harder, because you got all this other tech debt that you haven't considered and still has to be worked on. So if you treat security like an afterthought, then the effects will also be an afterthought, meaning you won't be secure. And the burden then falls on the consumers, which a lot of times, what can you do about it? If you don't allow me to MFA, how am I going to handle the MFA? And why I mentioned that caveat, because every once in a while we hear about, we got, and I'm not going to name names, right? You have to use the security tools that are on hand, or the security features, right? So if you have a service, if you have a system that has MFA as an option and you choose not to enable it, in my perspective, it doesn't matter that it was enabled by default, because you chose not to turn it on. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's the back and forth of maybe that should be the default and you turn it off, or maybe it should be easier to find. Yeah, absolutely. We can have that conversation. I think there's also a lot of accountability of, my vendor didn't make me secure. even when the tools are available, that's I think a little irresponsible to shove off.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm currently writing a blog, which I think will ruffle some feathers, but like I'm hoping this spells like, for me, it's like a question of whether we just need to kill all security attestations and certifications and start with something deeper. Like, obviously, like, do we get to the point where you just expose your actual live security monitoring and feeds and actual what's actually happening to your customers, rather than putting it through either a trust center or relying on a SOC 2 or an ISO, but actually giving granular visibility that says, you know what, here's a real transparency, here's what we're doing. I don't know, that's my theory, but people can disagree.
I think that, no, I don't disagree. I think how we go about that is the hardest part. Because, right, the point of having, my understanding of having a third party attestation is you have an independent individual or group of individuals that said, hey, based on these criteria, this is how they stack up. And right, that's kind of the issue that a lot of people have with SOC 2, and you're very vocal about that. And I'm largely in support of that as well, where, right, SOC 2, it's just doing what you say you do, and having someone be able to do that. And who knows whether or not that stuff is actually effective or if it's good enough, right? So I think if as a broader industry, we can say, yeah, this is what we expect to see from any vendor, any provider, everything else is gravy, meaning you have to show us how you're doing your encryption at rest, how you're doing your encryption, how you're doing your access control. If you could do that and then show it in a granular way without that adding insecurity to your own environment, absolutely. How we do that is going to be tough.
Yeah, and Prashant making an interesting comment. This is unrelated but also connected, about the fact CrowdStrike's doing a round of layoffs, not financially, but because of the use of AI. And we've just seen multiple companies who are basically removing tier one, whether that's SOC or HR, whatever it is, entry level positions replaced with AI. And I've seen, I mean, I've set some of this stuff up. We know it works, but like, my question about that is always like, where's the future? Like, if I look at my own career path, I learned from being tier one, tier two, tier three. Like, if you don't have that and that's get automated, do you have leaders who have big gaps in the future? I don't know. And like, to your point of visibility of like, should you let people see everything? And my question is always, well, now if it's going to be AI driven, like, have you got a problem that you're actually going to get hallucinations in the AI and telling people postures that aren't actually accurate because the response is usually given to someone else?
I think
and Simon's point is valid too. If there's no entry level, then where does tier two come from? And then if that goes up, like Simon, I think CISOs are in trouble because they will never learn the skill set if they don't have what underpins it, right? It's anyway. Well, I don't want to go on this deep technical conversation. These are boring to me. I want to talk about being human. So you came on and I was thinking, what do I want to talk about? I think I've met several people in different fields who are categorically nice. Right. So we talked before we came on, Carl Mattson, CISO at Endor Labs, probably the nicest CISO I know. Everybody loves Carl, right? Then you've got, if we're going to marketeers, George Kameda, the CISO Society, is one of the people that everyone loves. Simon worked with Steve Stitch Hindle, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, right? We have a BDR called Zali, who is probably one of the nicest people on the planet, like sincerely, genuinely nice. And you are probably the nicest cybersecurity professional I've ever worked with, like a genuinely just nice human being. So it's a weird line of thought, but I'm going to try and work out why. So why, Chris? Like, how important is it in our profession where we're so driven by data, action and stuff, just to be a genuinely nice person?
No, I mean, that's a really good question. I wish I had a straightforward answer. I mean, I think part of why I do it, I mean, maybe not why I do it, is because I figure what's the reason for doing it any other way? I feel like it's a path to least resistance, right? If this is my default, I don't have to tell myself to relax, not be a jerk. Then when the time comes where I do have to put my foot down, be firmer, be less nice, be less kind, right? I can still do so with the other perspective of, look, I'm not saying things or doing things in a certain way just to get my way. It's because I want a good outcome for everyone involved. And I think that there is an element of, you have to be disconcerted, I guess, for lack of better terms, with what the outcome is going to be for you. If what you're asking for is, hey, look, this isn't for me, this is for us, right? This is for our company, for our team, for our mission. And right, you know how I operate. A lot of it means I'm going to be doing extra work. It's like, hey, we need to make this happen. I'm happy to do as much as I can. I just need you to give me access or to give me the green light, and I'll go make it happen. Which I mean, is I guess from a certain perspective sacrifice. But when your goal is not, hey, this is going to make me look good, this is going to make me money, this is going to get me in a better position, but it's, hey, this is a win for all of us. I think it feels better in the end, and you're able to stomach, I guess, a little bit of that extra sacrifice where, yeah, maybe you didn't need to, but it ends up coming out with a better result for everybody.
Interesting. So it's more having, we talk a lot in the tech about the North Star. And I think it's more having a North Star which is not revenue focused, but a North Star that it's about how we get there, I guess. I want to pick up some of the questions and then come back to that. Jonathan, I'm with you. If a vendor can't tell you how they do a control themselves without pointing to a document, then I'm very nervous as well. That's totally true. To Carl's question, that's the absolute argument people are having right now. How does anyone become a tier 2 if there's no tier 1? Like, how do you get an entry-level job if the entry level just became middle management? That's pretty difficult. Jonathan and I also agree that many CISOs are ex-auditors and don't have the technical or actual cyber skill sets that are relevant. I don't think I have enough crypto shorts. It's a good question. I need some detail on that. When you say what would your advice be for MSPs to build and scale cybersecurity teams? Do you mean as an MSP building and scaling other people's teams, or building your team to deliver services? Give me some context. We'll happily pick that question up. And then to Jonathan, it's less about being nice and more about doing what is best for the people in your organization within their growth and success. Kept in mind, they are content, the work will flow. Just respect and deserve, and they deserve it, and respect they deserve, and they will appreciate it. I agree. So I've said this multiple times in the podcast. And I've said this to Chris several times before as well. The best thing you can do as a CISO is for one of your team to leave because they need your job. Right? That is the single best thing, because that gives people true progression. Chris, I think that point's really good on when he talks about the fact that it's about doing what's best for the people in the organization. I think that's when I look at you. You talked about like doing what it's a win for everyone in the company. But I think your emphasis almost in the way you said it was company. When I think your emphasis really in reality is people.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm kind of bad at that now. I've been doing a little bit more. I mean, still hands-on, but I've been doing more of the company level stuff, meaning the operations aside from the people. But I mean, when I say company, I mean people, because without the people, there is no company, right? You can make the argument, oh, well, without a product, there's no company. No. If you got people, and you got people that are willing to work and work with you, there's always going to be something to do. So company is, in my mind, is analogous to people. I should have stated that before.
No, I think that's right. I think it's natural to you, but for those who it's not, how do you action that? So a lot of companies now put huge pressure on delivery, metrics, product. Like if you're in sales function, you're stressed by trying to deliver numbers and revenue. Like if people aren't naturally the kind of people you are, how do they action trying to put people first? What are some little things they can do to kind of get them in the right momentum?
I think you have to experiment a little bit, and a lot of that is, hey, instead of thinking, right, when we talk about what's good for business, right, we're usually thinking about the numbers, right, the spreadsheets. That's where we get into people are just suits or lines in a spreadsheet. I think I'd say you got to kind of push the other direction, say like, well, let's get to know the people. Like, forget about what this person's doing for the job. Like, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me how you get your job done. And I know it's not really natural for a lot of people. It wasn't for me at first, but once you start to understand that, hey, like these are people just like me, right? They're just like you, just trying to do the things so they can go home to their families, spend time outside of work. They realize that, like, we're doing this, we might as well do this right. And it would suck a lot less if I enjoyed the people that I was working with. And once you realize that about yourself, that everyone else probably feels like that in a certain, to at least one degree or another. So showing interest in the other people that you're around, whether or not they're on your team, and then saying, hey, like, we do stuff together every once in a while. How do I do my thing better so it just comes out with a better result? How do I make it suck a little bit less for you, right? And just making those small shifts of like, yeah, you know what? This is just business. This is a business decision to, you know what? There's people doing these things. What are these people? How do these people feel about how I do my things with them?
Do you think that the personal relationships, you have to try and make an effort to know and really know people on a personal level before you can collaborate and succeed together as a team? Or do you think that's tertiary in today's world when we're all remote?
I think that if you're not doing it, you're missing out on a lot of potential. Meaning you can have a good working relationship with people, like just throw it over the fence to the IT team, to the engineering team, to the security team, to sales, right? Hey, this is your wheelhouse. I know you're good at this. Just go and handle it. I've seen, I mean, without going too deep into the specifics, but I've seen relationships at my current company at Whistic and with other companies that I've worked at in a bunch of different functions that you can certainly do that. I've also seen where it is inevitably way, way better results when I know the person that's asking, when they have the context. So they're just like, hey, can you do this? It's like, hey, this is the context. I know you're like just softening it a little bit, I guess, for lack of better word, saying, hey, I know you're busy, you're in audit, or I know you're in 5 different sales discussions right now. This is something that would be really helpful. And I'd be more than happy to either support you, return the favor, what have you, because then you have the willingness of someone's cooperation, whether it be you receiving the help or you giving the help, instead of just saying, look, this is your job. If you could do it, that'd be fantastic. And I think that the willing, that factor of me being willing to do that, or the other person willing to cooperate with me, makes all the difference in speed and quality, and then everything that is based on that after the fact.
I mean, yeah, I could challenge that and say effectively you're buying favors through emotions, which is not wrong. It's not wrong, but like, I guess digging deeper, like, should we just be building more meaningful relationships that we never cash in on? Like, do you think that workplaces are more successful and we do better when we actually just almost like cohabit as a family to a degree? And it doesn't matter what you're asking people for, like, because they're not favors, because it's just the way it is. Like, you can just say do it because it's your job, because you have that underlying relationship. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, no, I certainly agree. And I'm not, I guess to rephrase, I'm not saying like everything should be a favor, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe that's how we approach it. But the way that I see it, if one of my sales guys was to say, hey, like, I know I've asked you a lot of favors, like, I'm never going to see it that way. Again, maybe that's just me, but
Yeah.
they'll ask me a favor every week. Hey, can you do this questionnaire? Can you review this contract? Can you do these red lines? I don't view that as a favor. I see that as me doing my job. Then again, the impetus is on me on whether or not I'm going to see it that way. So if all of a sudden this guy, this gal that said, hey, can you do me this favor, just says, hey, I got a thing for you. Sure, no problem. I'm not going to, even if they drop that language of please do this for me as a favor, that's not going to change the way that I approach my work. So I agree with you in the extent of certainly there's detriment in saying, hey, like, if you could do this thing for me, I'll be in your debt, right? I think there's danger in treating relationships transactionally like that. I think that maybe part of it is, I think, in the early stages of a relationship, right? Because it's like this outside of work too, where you have to have something in common. And sometimes even just having that feeling of this person was nice enough to offer me help, or was comfortable enough with me being me to ask for my help, if we want to go the other direction, shows that we're personable enough and we're willing to engage in a relationship, even when that might not be the basis for us having a friendship. So
yeah, I want to address some of the comments, and I've got on the line where I'm going with. Jonathan, I think we literally, you're like my mental CISO twin, which Simon will probably verify. I think we see things very similar. But I think your point is that when you get into an org to try and define who's going to take over and mentor is kind of like always my mentality. And I really like what you said. So my kind of alignment to this is always, and my teams know, like, I'll say, where do we want to be in a year or 6 months time? Go figure it out. Tell me how we're going to get there, and I'll just check in and make sure they're doing it right. I think that's how you build and scale people's ability, and also you give them trust and allow them to like succeed together. And then Simon's point about giving, like, I agree. I think the older we get, and I think we're all in fortunate positions that we're probably financially okay, because that is the nature of the industry we work in. But finding karma in the world, I think, is important. And I think often, like, you see what relationships mean in a workplace. The reason I poked on the kind of favor cashing in is because I think that you find out what a relationship means when you move on. When you move a company, the fact that you still maintain those levels of bonds and friendship shows that it meant more than a transactional thing. And I think that's, as you see between companies, that you see it. To Itz's point about, so she's asking about building internal teams. What would your advice be for MSPs to build and scale cybersecurity teams? Of course, that is I guess it's, you're going to have to stop me and interrupt me if I'm on the wrong lines, but I think there's like 3 phases to this, and then I'll shut up. Like, I think one is knowing what the hell you need. People hire and build teams without knowing what their problems are they're trying to solve. And cyber is now so broad. As Chris is probably the best generalist I know, can speak to, like, there is a very broad generalist skill set. So find out what you need and what you really need from a skill requirement and from a skill level to who you're going to hire. right now, I would probably also look into what technologies or capabilities can deliver some of those functionalities without needing the people in place. And then I think the key, which Jonathan's mentioned, Chris has mentioned, and I've mentioned, is MSPs have super high churn. So I think that if you want to build and scale teams, you need to deliver meaningful relationships. I think this is a great topic for this conversation, because I think that you need to build what feels like quasi families where people want to work together and they want to solve problems and they want to help each other, because that's the only way that teams really scale, particularly MSPs where they just jump between whoever gives the higher salary. I think I've answered your question. Ask in more detail if it doesn't. Because I want to come back. So I think one of the inherent problems is when people are super nice. I'll tell the group. So I once bonused Chris. I gave him a bonus component based on taking his holiday, because I got so frustrated with Americans not taking holiday, which drives me mad. It's a whole different problem that most people in the UK don't understand. But do you think there's an inherent risk if you are just a nice person that you then just get overly used?
Yep, they call us doormats. Is the term that I've heard, and I had to learn that the hard way. Not and that's the tough thing, is a lot of people won't do so maliciously, meaning they're not going to identify you as someone that's easy to take advantage of and do so intentionally. There's also the other side of, you only have so much time in the day, so much energy, so much mental focus, and I guess what you could say energy reserves, where eventually if you say yes to everyone else at your expense and you don't keep anything reserved for yourself, you don't take time off, you don't go walk, you don't step away from the screen every once in a while, you approach burnout. I guess that's where I'd like to make a metaphor that translates a little better, but yeah, you end up effectually being a doormat, because whether you chose to or not, people will then step on you for going up, going out, going around. But it's because you say yes all the time, and that's also something that I think you didn't exactly bonus me on, but it's something that you and John and Juan, all the leaders that I've had in while I've been working in this industry, have said, like, you got to learn how to say no. I'm still learning how to do so, but I'm able to do so much better than I have before, because now I can say, I can absolutely do that. I just can't do it right now. Or if this does need to be done right now, I can get you in touch with someone else that can, right? So when we say no to protect yourself, it doesn't mean directly saying no. It just means protecting enough of what you need to keep in reserve, even if that means that, like, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of disappointment because you're used to saying, yes, I can do that. I'll get it done. Right. And then to your point about making sure that your team, that those people that you're mentoring are in a good position. It's you don't think about it as you're disappointing other people. Think about it almost like in a redirection. You're not pushing back. You're redirecting and say, you know what? Our team, we can certainly get that done. And I know someone that would love some exposure, some experience with this particular project, and saying and getting that connection going. Because at that point, the person with the request, they get the thing done. You don't end up burning yourself out because you're not trying to work 25 hours on a 24-hour day. And the other person that's actually taking this on gets to try something new, which you never know. They might end up loving that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Jonathan, you need to take a vacation, by the way. I suggest 4 a year at a minimum. That's my personal preference, but you need to travel and see the world. Prashant, I agree entirely. I'll tell you an interesting stat I read today. That most CISOs receive between 1 or 2 actual video outreaches, like specific video outreaches per month, 1 or 2. But everyone I met watches all of them, myself included. So I think that you're right. I think what happens, though, is not necessarily that people are asking you when you're not the signer, is they're not taking the effort to make anything personal and meaningful. And if someone came to me and gave me that message and I was you and I wasn't the buyer, I'd at least have then probably the engagement level to say, go and talk to this person. So I'd feel like they actually made an effort. But maybe. So anyway, interest of time, because I'm going to wind up a little bit and some of the thoughts that I think that you put on, not shake your head if you disagree, but I think where we've got to kind of 3 things for me is, number 1, have a North Star that is strategic, almost ideological, like drive people to a meaningful goal, which is not X million ARR, which is about what are we going to be? Like, how are we going to do something that matters? Mm-hmm. I think number 2 is being a genuinely nice human. And I think that that's a skill we can learn as much as we inherently have. Like building relationships that are meaningful and just giving without the necessary desire to receive back, but just building real meaningful relationships. I think number 3 is that important skill of partly saying no, but also partly engaging others, right? As much as saying no is one skill, the same as like, how do we bring others in to keep building and fostering this level of community and family? I think they're the three things I took from you as being the nicest guy in cyber that I know. So they're the three lessons I think if anyone's taking away from today, they probably should take with them, which are, again, find a strategic thing that people can align to, which is not driven by metrics. Just be a nice person. As I recently said on George and George's Brass Knuckles and Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks podcast, don't be an asshole. And number 3, find a way to bring other people in because you can't do it for yourself. As you know, I always finish with a random question that came from my previous guest. This one came from Stitch, Mr. Steve Hindle, who he's gone quite like business sensible rather. I was surprised. I was going to ask something stupid, but he went with, if you're hiring a person, you've got qualifications, experience, and aptitude. You can only ask for 2 of them. Which 2 matter more than the other one?
Can you say the 3 again, please?
Qualifications, experience, and aptitude, which I think is natural intelligence or skill set. Which one of those really matters? Which 2 of those matter most?
I think aptitude is by far the most important, because at that point you're just kind of mincing words in terms of, well, have you done the job before? Which, right, sometimes it's just based on luck or timing. The other one is look.
So what are you dropping? Qualifications or experience?
Ooh, I'm gonna take the controversial route and say drop experience, because if you have the aptitude and you can show me that you have the willingness to go learn, I'll take whatever you got and we'll go make something great happen. Whereas if you can do the job and you've done it before, but you're kind of lazy about it, I don't know if we're going to work as well together. So
I like it. Jonathan is going for experience and aptitude and dropping qualifications. I can see the argument for dropping qualifications. I think they're meaningless. I've got lots of them. I think they're pointless.
I don't disagree.
The experience one is interesting. Yeah, I'm for that. See, as you know, I hire based on people. I've actually, for those who are listening, I've actually used Honda before as a model to say, can you please hire me someone like this person without giving like a hiring spec? So I think we gear to someone who has the aptitude, which is not necessarily a technical competence, but like that mindset, that hunger, that ability to solve problems. I think that's the one. If any of those, I think if I just needed one, that's the one. Honda, you need to hit some Street Fighter moves before we can leave the call, I'm afraid. I'll try. There we go. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I appreciate your time. Chris, thank you for giving your time up. It has ever been a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. We'll speak again soon. You send me the question for the next guest. If anyone has any questions in the meantime, they can send them via the InfoSec live LinkedIn group or to me or Chris directly, and we'll share his details. But thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Over and out. Bye.